Okay, so I just got home from work and I have some audio editing to do. And yeah, something just happened that completely threw off my groove. So, I'm not going to reveal the name of this person. And I mention this because it's very important with me personally about how to understand me and why I believe what I believe. See, there's this coworker that takes me home sometimes after work, and well, she's interesting. So she tries to make conversation with me and asks me things, and she asks me, like, she was asking me if I ever wanted to get married. And I'm thinking, well, why would this lady ask me if I wanted to get married? And I'm like, no, not planning on it. And she's like, why not? And I'm like, well, I don't really want to get married because usually that implies that somebody's having sex, and I don't have sex with anybody. I've vowed celibacy for life. So that's the basic gist of what happened starting out. But it got weirder from there because ever since then, she's been trying to get me to explain why I refuse to have sex. It's weird. So I'm explaining to this middle-aged lady why I don't want to have sex. Why she cares about why I don't want to have sex in the first place is beyond me, which I find a little strange. But it's interesting because me being the kind of person I am, I like to answer questions. I answer people's questions because I actually always have a response for why I do things, because I'm a very structured person. So I explained about how procreation is unethical and how it's selfish to have children. So what does she do? She says it's not selfish to have kids because I want my own kids. Why would I want somebody else's kids who made love or whatever, something to that effect? And she said that her daughter was meant to be here because otherwise she would have had a miscarriage. God has a plan, and if he didn't have a plan for her daughter to be here, then she would have had a miscarriage. So the moral of the story is God causes miscarriages. So basically every time somebody has a miscarriage and loses their baby that they conceived, God did it. That's what she said to me. And I'm like, okay. And this is not a new belief. I know there are people out there who believe this, especially Catholics who believe in letting God decide how many children they're going to have. And I'm like, this is very, very weird because people, they have sexual intercourse, the very thing that causes children to be created, and then they say God did it. No, there's a system of biological reproduction, and people know cause and effect. But what's strange, and I figured something out, the psychology of this is very weird because here's what people do. They make their choices of how they want to live their life, and then whatever happens, they say it's God's will. So here's the thing is, if somebody, if somebody has sex and they have a miscarriage, they'll say it was God's will that baby wasn't meant to be here. And if they keep the baby and give birth to it, then they'll say God has a plan for that baby's life, and that's why they're here. And if they go and have an abortion, they will say that it was God's will for them to have an abortion because God let them do it. I see how this works. Basically, God is an excuse. God is an excuse for people to do immoral acts without feeling bad about it. This explains everything. Like, I finally get it now. I mean, people, and I should have seen this sooner. I mean, there were hints of it. Why didn't I see the signs? So, people, for example, when vegans talk about how it's wrong to be killing non-human animals and to be eating meat, dairy, and eggs and honey and all this, and how it kills all these different animals, well, then they'll say, well, God commanded the killing of animals in the Old Testament, or Jesus ate fish, or, well, humans are made in God's image, but those other animals don't matter. God gave man permission to eat animals. So what are they doing? What carnists do and what natalists do, and natalists, for those of you who don't know, is people who defend procreation, who are very firm believer that it's a good thing. So, but people who procreate and people who kill animals by buying animal products, these people, all they have to do is use God to defend their actions. They can do evil acts and then say, well, it was God's will. That's what they do, and this is why I don't like religion. And it's sad, and this coworker that for some reason is obsessed with knowing why I don't want to have sex. I'm sure she means well, she's trying to be friendly, but it's just sad that her belief system is one like this. And this religious belief keeps people from learning from their wrong behavior and changing. And the only reason that I'm able to improve my life is because I'm an atheist. Because if I do something and it doesn't work out well, I can say, oh, well, that wasn't a good idea. I wish that I hadn't done that. So here's what I'll do differently next time. I learn from my mistakes. But instead, if I was still a Christian, I would probably be saying, well, there must have been a reason God had me do that. For example, my mom thinks that it was part of God's plan, that there was a reason God had me join the Navy. And I don't see it that way. No, I just see it as I joined the Navy because I wasn't able to get a job and thought it would give me a future. It didn't, but I'm doing fine now, so I'm not brokenhearted about it now, but it's just because something happens doesn't mean that it was God's will. Even if there is a God, the idea that if something happens, it's God's will is a very bizarre idea, because then other things happen that are not God's will. So what do people do? Well, then they blame that person and say, well, it was their free will, or they blame Satan. Will nobody admit that there are logical flaws in their belief system? It's very sad, and I really don't like having rants about religion very much, but I'm just trying to process this. So God causes miscarriages. Your children are here because God wanted them to be here. Otherwise, you would have had a miscarriage. So newsflash, everybody. I learned something. God causes miscarriages and causes abortions and causes children to be born. It has nothing to do with people having sex. Who knew? Wow, what a revelation. All I know is it's been a long day and I'm tired, but I'm I just can't believe the things that people believe, and it's weird. This makes me only more determined to continue my Celibate Vegan Voices podcast with Monique, because there are so many layers to the topic of why someone chooses celibacy. And so when people ask me questions about why I choose to be celibate for life, I answer them. They just don't like my answers.